Good afternoon and thank you for coming to this session. Today I'll be talking about developing SCORM-based e-learning content for a common English course. I'll try to stick to the format that was given to me in terms of what I'm supposed to share, so I'll try to be as brief and as pointed as possible. So I'll talk about three aspects, a brief background of what the project is, what prompted me to apply for this particular grant, and then I'll move on to what exactly I developed as part of this particular project. And finally, I'll share some lessons that we learned during the making of this project. So I'll just start with a brief background about where this grant was applied for. Language enhancement at Lingnan is a requirement, a graduation requirement, and there are 4 courses currently being run. 3 courses are offered by SEAL and 1 is offered by the English department. And the other 3 courses are essentially skill-based proficiency courses where they teach listening, speaking, reading and writing. And this particular course adopts a different model of language enhancement where we teach them how to look at different texts and analyze them based on a genre-based perspective. So students engage in a variety of texts like discussions or reports or advertisements or narratives or recounts, and they are required to analyze these texts based from a genre-based perspective. So they're supposed to look at what the purpose of the text is, what's the structure of the text, what are the language and linguistic features, so on and so forth. Now, this course is taught across, so all university students take this course, and there are around 7 or 8 faculty members who teach this course, and they teach it every semester. So every semester there are 300 students taking the course, 300 to 400 students depending on the enrollment. And so the content, we don't have any particular textbook. The content is created by the course coordinator and it is shared across with other teachers. So all the teachers are supposed to teach the same content. All the students are supposed to access the same content. And this sharing and accessing can be quite problematic, especially when you have the same material and how do you share it. So currently what we do is we share it on a common departmental drive, and teachers just copy the materials or the PowerPoints or whatever onto their USBs or H drives and show it in the classroom. There is no material available for students to access except the PowerPoints that are there or provided by the teachers and some of the readings that are given to them or examples. So what we wanted to do is to develop some kind of shareable content, like a supplementary material for students to access, and they can go back and look at these materials and kind of do some kind of tasks or activities which help them to understand how to analyze genres. So the idea of this project was to develop shareable content which is accessible through the university platform, and to design a course content through which was more structured with different kinds of learning objects, and to implement this kind of a cross-sectional course where other teachers who are teaching different kind of required courses could also learn something from this. How did I use shareable content? Basically, it was used through this particular reference model. What do we mean by that? You create learning objects, meaning to say units of learning, which are in the form of texts or images or graphics or animations. You put it all together into a package, which is a SCORM package, and you zip it and you upload it onto any kind of learning platform, and students can access it. Now, designing all of this takes a lot of time, and it requires a lot of instructional strategies. So one of the technical reasons for using this kind of a model was because this could be accessed across any platform, across any device. So the idea is, tomorrow if we don't use Moodle, and if we use, let's say, Blackboard or WebCT or any other learning management system, we can still use the materials. We don't have to change the type of the materials. So that was the idea behind using this particular shareable content model. Secondly, the idea was to, for pedagogic reasons, that clearly teachers don't, and students, for example, they're using so many different kind of devices. So the materials that are developed on one particular software or one particular program probably may not be accessible, let's say, on an iOS or an Android device or so on and so forth. So the idea was you create material in such a way that can be accessed across any device, any platform, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea behind SCORM, meaning Shareable Content Object Reference Model. So essentially it's just a model which we follow, and it doesn't matter what kind of file you use. The process of developing these SCORM modules was followed through by an instructional design model, which is very commonly used. So after analyzing the needs of the students, what you do is you need to storyboard the concepts. Now, basically, initially what teachers are doing is they use Moodle only as a delivery of content. So you put up handouts, you put up PowerPoint slides, you put up reading materials, and that's it. Students are just expected to access all that material. What this module is doing is you're creating activities, interactive activities, by storyboarding the content, developing it in a particular software, uploading it again onto Moodle, and then allowing students to access it. And the pedagogic design of the modules was something like this. So I'll just show you an example of what exactly it looks like so you get an idea. Okay, right now the screen is not very... Okay, so I don't know why this is not being accessed. But anyway, so basically the module begins with the learning objects of that, learning objectives, sorry, of that particular module. That in this module you're going to learn this, all right. So that's what we do. And then a concept is presented where the students are supposed to read something about that concept. And later they are supposed to do some kind of little activity, like a mini task based on the concept. So there is a reinforcement of that concept that is taking place. And as the concepts keep growing, as the module progresses, what the students are supposed to, there are little scaffolding activities as well. So the design of the module is like presentation, practice, produce. Like you present a concept, you practice that concept, and then you produce something. All of this is then consolidated into, all these structural elements are then consolidated into a final task based on that module, where students are supposed to come up with some kind of a written analysis of a genre. And this is exactly what they are required to do in the assessment, in the final exam. So, for example, maybe I can just show you some of these. So basically, say for example, they read a text, and then they kind of do some kind of activities based on that text. And then they submit, and they can get instant feedback based on that. And they can also see an answer. And they can go to, so there is, let's say, a structure of a narrative or whatever, language that is used in narratives, what is transitions, and then you have certain kind of mini tasks and so on and so forth. So similarly like this, like the structure of an advertisement, like what are the different aspects of an ad, so on and so forth. Okay. So having said that, what essentially I developed was 6 such modules, right, which were like consisting of around 20 to 30 screens per module. and each screen had some kind of task activity and interactive activity using. This is just the pilot, and this was just done for one set of students, and some teachers were asked to implement, because I haven't still integrated it into into Moodle for the entire cohort. But we did some kind of qualitative and quantitative evaluations. A survey was administered to students based on a particular e-learning. Again, it was adapted based on some kind of e-learning learning object design evaluation. And questions were related to the design of the modules, the quality of the content, and the learning potential. And most of the responses that we got from 102 students was quite good. We also had focus interviews, focus group interviews with 12 students to find out if they find this kind of learning valuable to them. And there were some interesting answers that we received over there. And more importantly, what we did is we also looked at, did it actually affect, students may like doing this kind of thing. Does it affect their actual production of the text? So we also looked at some kind of student writing samples to do that. So what did we find? I don't think this is visible, but anyway. We find that there are two types of learning. When we are asking for feedback from students say two things. One is the way the content is presented. So they're very happy with the organization and the structured way in which the content is presented. So the responses we get is, oh, it's very neatly presented, and there are lots of examples and lots of visuals, animation, and it's making my learning experience enjoyable. On the other hand, we also get feedback from students saying that, oh, I can understand the points much better than just listening in class. So that was the main idea, that apart from the classroom, what additional exercises can we give students to do? I got much better clarifying when I didn't understand what I didn't understand last week. Or things like when I just read from the PowerPoint slides, I don't usually soak up so much information, but when I'm doing this, I can do this at my own pace. I know when to stop, when to resume, and so on and so forth. So clearly students are finding this useful in terms of doing it in their own time, whenever they want to do it, outside of class, rather than just going back to looking at the handouts and looking at the PowerPoint slides. They're finding this kind of learning very useful. This is also reflected in their writing samples. You could see that now students are able to make connections between the different elements of the text in terms of analysis. So their application of the concepts is really elaborate and extensive, and we had teachers mark their samples of the text, and teachers give comments on those texts, and we get some very detailed examples of analysis. Okay, so this is what we did. What are the practical considerations? I was asked to see if I faced any kind of difficulties in producing this kind of program. Yes, initially there were lots of considerations in terms of, do you hire an RA? Do you hire a software engineer? Do you hire a software developer to do this? Hiring a software developer is okay, but in terms of designing, like the instructional design part, you need somebody who knows how to design this material, because the presentation practice production model is not probably something that a software developer would know. So initially, in the initial part of the project, what happened is I ended up being the instructional designer, I ended up being the software developer, I ended up being the content developer for everything. And later, I was successful in finding an e-learning service provider who could help with the development of the content. So what I would do was storyboard the content, like, okay, screen one, this should be there, these many buttons, clicking, so on and so forth. And I would do that, and translating that storyboarding into the actual software was done by this particular e-learning services provider. Having said all of that, we've been able to come up with a decent enough product in terms of, I mean, we're not selling it, but yeah, it's just for students to access. What's the next stage? The next stage is to integrate it into the full course, where around 700 students can use it in a year. So, and let's say 8 to 15 teachers teaching this course can actually use it. So in addition to their own materials, this is for the students, for them to practice and present their ideas. What do we learn from this? That if, for large courses especially, if there is some kind of a common platform where we can put up materials, and materials not just for reading, but also for students' practice, it's really worth it. Materials basically developed on a particular kind of a pedagogic design, not just uploading resources, handouts, or PowerPoints. It adds to a richer student learning experience. If students are clearly told what is the connection between what they are doing and what they are going to be assessed through in a concrete way, it really helps them engage in a better way. So developing content involves some kind of constructive alignment where students are able to see the connections between what is it that the course is expecting them to do, what will they learn from the course, what are the teaching and learning activities related to that course, and how they are going to be assessed on. If your materials are going to be designed in that way, clearly it makes sense to the students, and students do appreciate that. And most importantly, interactive materials in terms of reinforcement and scaffolding of concepts has been really useful to the students and has shown a positive effect on their learning. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any questions?